Okay, so this is a brand new book. It's called Client Confidential. It's written by Sean Hartnett, a former member of the British Army. It's a second book. This one is called Spooks, Secrets and Counter-Espionage During the Celtic Tiger. And one of the chapters focuses on the IRFU around the year 2008, post the World Cup in 2007, which has garnered a lot of attention really over the past couple of days. And I'm delighted to say the author of the book, Sean Hartnett, joins us on the line. You're very welcome to the show, Sean.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much for having me.
So we'll start by talking about your background, first of all, before we get into the chapter on the IRFU. You're a former surveillance technician in the Joint Communications Unit, the JCU, in Northern Ireland.
That's correct. I kind of ended up there more by accident than by design. I didn't really know what unit I was going to when I was being posted there. I knew I was going to this unit called Joint Communications Unit Northern Ireland, but it doesn't really mean anything, doesn't tell you anything about the unit. The only things I did know was it was extra pay and I didn't have to wear a uniform. So for any soldier, that's a bonus. So when they ended up getting there, I realised what I had gotten myself in for, and it wasn't what I had expected. It was a covert surveillance unit operating in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, basically was your role to act as a spy, or was it to counter surveillance?
No, my job was to build surveillance devices, fit them to vehicles, disguise them as rocks, and fit overt and covert cameras, listening devices, whatever was needed by the operators on the ground. Right, okay.
Then you proceed to lead the British Army in 2005. As I said, this is your second book, and I understand the British Army tried to ban your first book?
Yes, it is. Very, very, very hard they tried, but it wasn't possible. So, yeah, they came pretty hard for it.
How hard are we talking here? Did they get in touch with you directly?
No, they've never been in touch with me directly, but they tried through my publisher, I believe. They tried through the High Court in London to get a court order to ban it, and it was successful.
Right, okay. Let's talk about this book. Let's talk about Client Confidential. And Chapter 6 is called Rugby Sweeps. And you kind of paint a picture at the start of the chapter about being in the Ballsbridge Hotel in the year 2008. Eddie O'Sullivan is in big trouble after a poor World Cup in 2007. Can you just talk to us about the first time the IRFU makes contact with you?
Well, I was first brought in to basically analyse a sweep that was being done on their behalf that day for a team meeting at the Ballsbridge Hotel. So it was for a players' meeting. And when I got there, there was an operator already there carrying out a TSCM sweep, which is basically a sweep for listening devices or covert surveillance devices. And it was obvious from the outset that this guy wasn't up to scratch. The room hadn't been sealed, none of the sockets had been checked, none of the furniture had been moved, so he was basically just walking around with this kind of wand in his hand, and that was it. It was over within sort of 40 minutes, which isn't possible to sweep two meeting rooms that would take you, the best part of a day, sweep two large meeting rooms like that and to seal it off properly. So that was my first involvement.
Why was the sweep being carried out at that moment? Why were the IRFU in high alert?
Well, at the previous Irish committee meeting at the Shelburne Hotel, Philip Brown had concerns that there was information leaked from that meeting, and it had been leaked to the media. And it had been so accurate, the leak, that the information that had gotten back to the media, he had concerns that it might have been an electronic listening device that had picked up on it and recorded the entire conversation at the meeting.
This was a meeting that contained information that Eddie O'Sullivan was in trouble with his role and that Declan Kidney may be amongst the replacements.
Exactly. They were discussing who might be coming in, and that would hamper any recruitment process, obviously. If it gets out into the public domain that, X, Y, or Z are up for the job, their current clubs or countries might be thinking, well, they're on the way out before they've even negotiated with us. So, it's very sensitive information. Someone's coming under a new contract.
Of course it is. How confident was he in the fact that the room might have been bugged? How did he know that it wasn't just one of the personnel in the room who may have leaked the information?
Well, he didn't. That's just it. But he was belt and braces. He was actually doing the right thing. He was looking to eliminate all possibilities. And one of those possibilities is electronic eavesdropping. There are companies out there, and plenty of them, that will do that for you.
So how soon after that meeting does he get in touch with you?
I was called in probably 2 days before the following team meeting. So that would have been maybe a week or so after.
Right, so you go into the hotel, you look at the room, and you say in the book that the room probably isn't fit for purpose for anti-surveillance anyway, but you say that the crowd that had come in to do it, as you've already mentioned here, weren't up to scratch. Again, the same question kind of applies here. How do you counteract the idea that some of the personnel in the room may have been leaking information in that particular team meeting?
Well, you can't, as this is what I brief all, not just sporting organisations, but any company. Your greatest vulnerability is personnel. There's nothing to stop somebody walking out of that meeting, meeting up for a coffee with a journalist or a rival company, and imparting all that they've gotten at that meeting to that person. You can't stop that. The best way you can to prevent that is compartmentalisation, and at an organisation the size of the IRFU, that's difficult to do.
I'm sure it is. Like, what exactly was the brief? Because I know you mentioned Ger Carmody as well, and you mentioned that you had to go in and check to see if the other crowd had actually cleaned up the room properly. What was specifically the brief? Was it to check on them, or was it to check on the players or some of the personnel who might have been coming in?
Well, it's when you go in afterwards to make sure that no information has been left behind, right, which happens a lot, more often than you would think. You've had a meeting, everybody gets up and walks out, thanks very much. And left behind on the desk is little doodles or, notes they've been taken on pieces of paper. That's invaluable. I could collect that up and piece together what's happened in that meeting or get a very good idea. And if you're a would-be, investigative journalist or you're from a rival team or anything like that, that's gold if you can get that. So any meeting should be, not just beforehand should it be swept and sealed, but afterwards there should be a clean-up operation afterwards.
And was your sense that there was carelessness here on the part that might have actually been happening?
Yeah, I don't think that, to be fair, I don't think they'd ever been briefed on anything like this. What also has to come into consideration here is that this was the kind of cusp of professionalism in Irish rugby. These were the guys that were just coming to the, I don't want to say football star level, but rugby's image was on the rise, and these guys had never had to worry about that before. It wasn't a big deal. Whereas if you go to any of the professional football clubs, and indeed now any of the professional rugby clubs, that's part and parcel of your training. It's how to keep yourself safe from media attention and from that kind of thing. That's part of the brief now, but it wasn't back then. It was all relatively new.
Did you ever find any bugging of an IRFU room for players or for upper echelon officials?
No, it was far easier than that. Information, again, things like clear desk policies where you should have no information lying around. There was, it didn't have that mindset yet that information that they had would be valuable to others. That has changed. That wouldn't be the case now. I don't think you could walk into the IRFU headquarters now, walk around and pick up what you wanted. I think very much that has changed.
Yeah, so talk to us about that, the IRFU headquarters. Who gave you that mission, that brief to go in and break into the building, essentially?
Well, that was our overall brief. The brief was to find out, was that building bugged, or was there any compromise of the communication system that was in there? And as part of that, we decided to see how easy could we get in and how easy could we obtain information while we were in there. And I have to say, back in that time, it was quite easy. It wasn't difficult at all. Now, subsequent to our brief, a lot of changes were made. And again, you wouldn't be able to do that now.
How did he break into the building? How easy are we talking here? Could I have broken into it, or would he need your level of expertise?
No. It was, I don't want to say too much because obviously I'd be revealing how you would do it. And I don't want to do that for security of other premises, but let's just say I undid 2 screws and shorted the power, and I was into the main building.
Right. That's not something I could do.
Yeah, of course it is. Take 2 screws off the top and put the 2 wires together and the power will drop.
Right. Like that would be kind of your bread and butter from your background.
Yeah, if you wouldn't have to be a former covert surveillance operator to do that. You could be someone who just understands basic power on a lock.
And when you were breaking into locks in the IRFU headquarters, is there nobody in the building at the time or anybody who kind of gave you that brief who's a little bit concerned about that, no?
No. I mean, you're not flagging anything. No alarm is going to go off. You've opened, as far as the lock is concerned, you've legitimately opened it. So it's the same as if I put a pass key or I unlocked it. It's not seen it as a break. It's just seen it as I've opened the lock legitimately.
And did nobody, like, in the building kind of question who is this man coming in here and potentially kind of anybody walking by you as you're trying to do this, or was it all kind of secluded in secluded areas and you were in kind of a quiet area to do so?
No, we just walked upstairs. As you come up, there's Philip Brown's office and then there's a large old plan office, or there was back then, and just kind of went up and then I left. Thanks very much. What
was Philip Brown's reaction to that when you told him how easy it was?
I would say he was quite shocked. Yeah, but they implemented what was necessary thereafter, you know. It's like anything. Until somebody points out to you, you don't really realise it. I mean, there's probably flaws in everybody's security, and until somebody would look at it and go, well, look, this is a problem with your security, you probably never would have entered your head. It's not everybody would have looked at that and went, yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll open the lock and I'll drop the power.
Yeah. What did you find when you did break in?
Again, there's sort of no clear test policy. So as we were around, I could open up Philip Brown's personal assistant's diary and have a look. And unfortunately, in there was all the information you would really need about who he was meeting and when. And one of the meeting rooms we opened up, went into, and there written on the board was the salaries of some of the major players. Now, to me, I'm a rugby fan and it was interesting. Not really anything that I would be worth using, but for a journalist it would have been interesting to get hold of that information.
Who was getting paid the most?
I'm not going to answer that. I don't think that's fair. I wouldn't want anybody knowing how much I earn.
The last element actually of your work with the IRFU, and the last element of chapter 6 here that I wanted to ask you about is briefing Declan Kidney. Can you talk to us about that, what your role was in terms of briefing the new Ireland head coach at the time?
Yeah, I think at that point the IRFU had realised that, you know, we need to brief the players and the management team in a better way about the dangers of information security. And part of that was to sit down with Declan and say, look, this is what can happen, you know, with regard to your information. You need to keep it tight. You know, when you're having meetings, sensitive meetings, make sure the rooms are secure and, you know, that nobody's walking around with a dictaphone or anything like that. And he was quite open to it. And I also reminded him that not all of his, now I won't use the word enemies, but not all of his greatest fans would be inside the IRFU, and that's something you have to be careful of as well.
You said to him that there was a chance that he might get stabbed in the back from somebody within the IRFU?
Yeah, there were people that didn't want to have appointed. Right. And he knew that. He said he knew he wasn't everybody's favourite cup of tea, so he took it well.
It seems like a strange enough brief for the IRFU to give you to tell Declan Kidney that he might get stabbed by somebody within their own organisation, stabbed in the back, I should say, figuratively, by somebody within their own organisation.
By the IRFU to tell him that.
Sorry, you said it again?
I wasn't briefed by the IRFU to tell him that. I told him that.
And do you think that Declan Kidney took your advice?
I'd like to think so, yeah. He's a pretty good operator. He wasn't one to mouth off to the press, and he wasn't one to disclose too much information. I don't think that was necessarily all down to me. I think he's a clever enough operator without any of my help. But I'd like to think he took on board what I told him.
Okay, so let's park the rugby there, and speaking generally and separate to what we've just been talking about, do you think that surveillance is happening in other sports?
It's huge. You have to understand that, international sport is a multi-billion euro industry now, and where there's money, people will do what they have to do to get the upper hand. It's not something that's hit and miss anymore. It's something you must be prepared for, particularly at the very high level. You're talking a lot of money here, and ultimately, where there's money, there's skullduggery.
In terms of your own work at the moment, do you get much work in that line at the moment?
I only have a very few select clients now. I only deal with a few set clients. I don't take any more work, and I don't work for any sporting organisations, but I do have colleagues who do, particularly in the UK, who work for some of the big teams, both in football and rugby. And their role is, particularly around, when it's come to major games, is to ensure that the team security, I don't mean physical security, I mean their information security, is up to scratch.
And if you don't mind me asking, do you go by the pseudonym Sean Hartnett for their work as well?
No, I don't.
Right. So they have no idea that you've written a book telling everybody what you did with the IRFU?
No, they don't.
Do you think they would have an issue with that?
Oh yeah, major, I would think. I don't do too much of that work anymore, hence the reason I wrote the book. If I was trying to make a living out of it now, I don't think I'd be flavour of the month.
The IRFU have released a statement about Client Confidential. They said, it is apparent the author has fictionalised many elements in the account of the IRFU's engagement with RMI and has exercised extreme degrees of artistic licence in his portrayal of the process undertaken. What's your response to that?
I would have expected absolutely nothing less. I had the same reaction when I wrote Charlie 1, and yet they spent a lot of time trying to ban it. What I would say to people is, read them and even read that chapter of it, and you decide whether I could have had that much detail if I hadn't carried out what I'd done.
So you didn't fictionalise any elements of it?
No, it's the operation I carried out as I carried it out.
They say, for the record, the IRFU has never retained the services of or worked with a Sean Hartnett. Were you on their books, actually, Sean?
I was through a third party.
Okay. And do you have any idea if the IRFU continue to use a third party or anything along those lines?
I have no idea. I couldn't comment on that.
Right, well, congratulations on the book. It's called Client Confidential, Spooks, Secrets and Counter-Espionage during the Celtic Tiger. Sean Hartnett, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.